With the Alberta provincial election behind us, we wanted to chat with an Albertan who worked through social media and in-person events to bring awareness to the people of our province. Voter turnout was over 60%, with many Albertans feeling the issues of the day, including healthcare and the economy, and it made this election pivotal for the future of our province. Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud joins us now from Cochrane, Alberta, just outside of Calgary, to talk more about the results of Monday's election. Lindsay, welcome to Bridge City News.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, you're welcome. Now, what were your thoughts of the recent Alberta provincial election?
Well, from our perspective at Alberta Proud, we're a grassroots nonprofit advocacy group, and our number one focus is on advocating for our best in the world, Alberta energy, our Canadian energy. We take issue with celebrities and politicians who block and barricade our prosperity. And from our perspective, we've kind of seen this anti-energy, eco-radical movement, extremist movement within a lot of the NDP candidates. And we think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors when Rachel Notley would say that she was standing up for our energy sector. We just don't believe it based on her history in her first term in office. So we were very pleased to see that Premier Danielle Smith and the UCP gets another opportunity. I took some bets that evening. I'd up my bet from 48 seats to 51. When I went to bed after I was down at UCP headquarters and I was on the True North live radio show on Andrew Lawton's show, we had such a great time. Huge shout out to those guys. They're excellent. And so we were doing the live results as they came in. And I left after Danielle Smith's victory speech. I went to bed. There was 52 seats. I woke up, there was 49. So definitely there's been, and we'll see in the days to come, but there's definitely some really close ridings and 2 automatic recalls so far.
You know, well, let's talk a bit about that. Back in 2019, it was a landslide majority for the Kenney government. I mean, 63 seats down to 49. So what does that say about what's happening here in our province? Some people think it's actually a good thing, even though it's a majority, a slim majority, will keep the party more accountable.
I would agree with that. And very quickly, I want to say it's 2 automatic recounts, not recalls. My bad. So I do think it's important that we have balance. Certainly, that's a loss of quite a number of seats. And right now we're sitting at 49. That could go plus or minus a seat or 2, but it is a majority. It is a slim majority. 44 seats were needed for a majority government. I'm pleased to see it's a majority government, though, and not a minority government, because I think that when there's a minority government, just not enough work gets done.
Lindsay, there were some notable numbers in this election. Voter turnout was quite high at 62%, and over 750,000 votes were cast in advance polling, which set a new record. It appeared as though Albertans were quite engaged this election. What are your thoughts?
I think they were. I hope that we're considering keeping in mind the population growth since 2019 when we talk about those numbers. Personally, I advance voted. I think it's a wonderful resource for us. We have really busy lives nowadays. I always encourage people to advance vote. You just never know what can happen in your own personal life on election day. I think people were really intrigued by the leader versus leader, right? So I think people, the NDP has been brilliant with their marketing, and they've centered their entire campaign around Rachel Notley, around Team Rachel Notley. That was on all their signs. And certainly Premier Danielle Smith, she's a little bit contentious by some voters. She was, so I think the personalities and I think that's what intrigued people with this election rather than their cabinets so much and rather than their MLAs. I think just so much attention was drawn on Smith versus Notley. So I think that intrigued people. And I think as well as you have 2 polar opposite governments, the UCP and the NDP. Maybe several years ago, there's a few more similarities. I think that they've become so polar opposite. For me, it took a lot more than Rachel Notley putting on a blue blazer for a debate to show up that she's a conservative. So I think that you have one camp entirely on the right and one camp entirely on the left. And I think that I think when you have that polarization, it brings in kind of more that US style politics, and it captivates people, and it makes for fancy headlines.
Let's talk about some of the advertising, as you mentioned, from the NDP. When I sat on the media panel and some of the forums here, we had a lot of constituents come to the front, use the mic and say, we're tired of the negative attack ads. It's getting to be draining. We're sick of them. Calling out some of the NDP candidates here. But then at the same time, many people suggest that those negative ads were actually quite effective for the NDP. What are your thoughts?
I actually think it backfired on the NDP. So we were talking about this on the True North radio show the other night. How you noticed around town, and it was blowing up all over social media. There was those big signs. It's that stormy, moody background, and that look on Danielle Smith's face, and what will she do next? And it was really genius. Whoever in the UCP thought to put up the little signs next to them that said, "She'll cut taxes. She'll fix healthcare." So I think that it really backfired on them. I found that there was a turning point in this election, and that was the debate. And I think it's fair to say that Rachel Notley is a brilliant debater. She won her first term in 2015 based on that debate. But there's been some things happened, some things changed along the way. And I felt during that debate, there was a big anger machine that was coming forward. She interrupted Premier Danielle Smith a number of times, whereas Premier didn't interrupt her. She wasn't talking more about her record. She was focusing more on the negative attacks on the UCP, and I think that really backfired on her. I think people have been through so much in this province, in the world, in the country in the last few years. We've come through this pandemic. It's been a real roller coaster politically. And the UCP focused on moving the province forward and on a positive vision. And Alberta is calling, like all their campaigns that they've run over the last 6 months or so have been really positive about Alberta's growth, about our energy sector, and of course, tying it in with standing up to Prime Minister Trudeau and standing up to Ottawa and that whole theme of more Alberta and less Ottawa. So attack ads can be fun if they're done well. And I can't overall criticize that the NDP hasn't had a really interesting history of doing some really brilliant social media campaigns. But I think they went too negative, and I think it backfired on them. And I think that's what won the UCP the election.
Now, the UCP's Jason Copping and Casey Madu are two cabinet ministers who lost their seats, Lindsay. Tyler Shandro, last time we checked, was behind 7 votes with a recount coming. So what are your thoughts on some of these high-profile candidates who lost their seats?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the shuffle in her cabinet for sure. There's also going to be an automatic recount in Calgary Glenmore for UCP MLA Whitney Isaac. She lost by, I think it's 30 votes is the margin there. So those two are automatic recounts. Another really interesting one, that evening when we were doing the live election results on True North, we each picked a horse who we were watching to come in, and I was paying close attention to Banff Kananaskis MLA Miranda Rosin. Now, Miranda was up all night. She was up all night, and then she was in the middle of, I think, her victory speech when 4,000 advance votes from the NDP came in and totally turned the tables on that. So now there's a vote margin where the NDP candidate has won that at this time, and there's 199 vote margin. So I'm interested to see if there's going to be something happening there, and if there's also going to be a recount there.
Both Edmonton and Calgary saw an increase in seats for the NDP. What do you think really led to this?
Edmonton is what we really have to watch for. I think the UCP. I mean, we lost Casey Madu's seat. We've lost everything in Edmonton. It's a stronghold of Orange, and I'm concerned that this is going to pit us versus them, or a rural versus urban. Because there's a bit of a mix in Calgary. Certainly, the NDP picked up some seats there, but they couldn't flip some really key ridings, which they were hoping to do in order to be victorious that evening. But we've got a real problem when we know that there's kind of more of a left-leaning inside Edmonton. It's the capital, a lot of public sector jobs and that sort of thing. So I think the UCP has their work cut out for them. What can they do to bridge that gap? What can they do to appeal to these people and to find that soft middle ground, I guess, with the public sector unions and to champion Edmonton? And I think eventually, of course, every city wants money, and it's going to take, building a good, solid relationship with Mayor Amarjeet Sohi and seeing if they can, make some positive contributions to some much needed infrastructure, schools, hospitals, that sort of thing. That's probably what it's going to take. But it's definitely concerning because with how orange they've gotten up there, I think that puts Conservatives at a significant disadvantage for an election in 4 years from now. And as you and I both know, 4 years goes by pretty quickly.
It certainly does, you bet. UCP leader Danielle Smith focused a lot on the economy and taxes, and the NDP and Rachel Notley talked a lot about healthcare and education. Do you think maybe the UCP did enough to convince Albertans that they are the party of choice when it comes to healthcare and education?
I think that that is a work in progress. And I think when it comes to trust, I still think Albertans overall have more trust in Rachel Notley and the NDP when it comes to healthcare. But I think what really happened there and what really backfired is, and I know this just from talking to a ton of Alberta Proud people, a lot of people would come up to me and say, Lindsay, Danielle's going to make me pay for a doctor. It's a really, well, it was really negative attack campaigning, certainly. But what they did is they took a soundbite based on things that Premier Smith said before in her time when she was a radio talk show host for 6 years. She's been involved in the energy sector. She's been around politics for a really long time, of course. And as a champion for private sector, she's of course pontificated and tossed around different ideas based on the intention of how do we make, I mean, AHS is one of the most bloated bureaucracies out there. I think a 5-to-1 manager ratio capital. We have, we've had some major spending problems there, and reining that in is really key. We can't just throw money at things to fix it. And so in previous years, Danielle Smith has come out talking about a semi-private system that seems to scare Canadians a lot. I mean, we really do already have a two-tiered system. So doing things like giving people the option to not leave the country and pay for surgeries and cosmetics and different things like that here instead of leaving the country to do that and putting that, lining the pockets of other jurisdictions. There was a lot of good stuff in what she was saying, but the NDP just took a soundbite and they went with that. And she came out with her healthcare guarantee. Premier Smith came out with that healthcare guarantee. I think that was about a month ago, and said, no Albertan will ever have to pay out of pocket for a doctor. So the thing is it started to come to people that, oh, it's a lie. The NDP really largely campaigned on one big lie. Now, I'm not saying Danielle Smith has never talked about some form of private health care. That's not to abolish the public system, of course, but it was a lie that they came out with, and they championed that. And I think the UCP maybe could have. It's a hard balance. They took a focus on cutting taxes, making lives more affordable for Albertans, moving us forward. It's a strategy that worked for them, but I think in her first 6 months, in all the work she's done with AHS, we've managed to get red alerts down in Edmonton and Calgary, I think, to effectively to zero, reducing wait times, reducing EMS times. So that's really positive. And I think the proof will just be in the pudding for Premier Smith and the UCP to show, hey, we're the government that's actually making real change and real difference to make sure that people get the health care they need.
Let's go back to the UCP leadership race for just a moment. How tight, how close it was between Travis Toews and Danielle Smith, with Smith coming out on top. Do you think this election would have looked a lot differently if Travis Toews would have been the leader of the UCP, more of a landslide victory? Or do you think maybe potentially the UCP would have lost because a lot of people looked at Travis Toews as just Jason Kenney 2.0?
Yeah, a lot of people said that. It was interesting. I had the great privilege with my friend Jamil Javani, former president of the CSFN network. We did an interview with the leadership candidates last fall. So we had all 7 of them all on stage. We had 15 minutes with each of them. And I can say they're all such experienced, kind, incredible people. And I think that Premier Smith certainly has set a tone when she first came into office 7 months ago, and she gave a cabinet position to 5 out of 6 of her fellow leadership candidates. I think that was her saying, hey, we need to unify. We need to move this forward. Strategically, I think that was very smart. And I think through this campaign, through the last 30, 40 days, you've seen a lot of Brian Jean, you've seen a lot of Rebecca Schultz, especially down and around the Calgary area. And I think that effectively worked really well for the UCP. And it showed that this is the team that you can trust. Would it have looked different under Travis Toews? Yeah, I think it would have looked really different. I wonder how the unity would have worked in the back rooms. I'm really not sure, because that's kind of more that era of that Kenney era. And it's still divisive. Conservatives still need to work within. We still need to all unite for the same goal: a better Alberta, restoring the Alberta advantage, protecting our energy sector from Justin Trudeau and just transition. And I think if people can just drop their ego a little bit and work and push forward, I'm hoping that Danielle Smith was the right choice. And we're behind her at this time.
So, Lindsay, we only have a few short moments left here, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think will be the first order of business for the newly elected UCP?
I think that Premier Smith alluded to that very clearly in her victory speech, which was setting the tone with Ottawa, setting the tone with Prime Minister Trudeau. The fact is that we have something called just transition looming. It's actually something right out of the Rachel Notley NDP playbook circa 2015, where they actually use the term just transition. So the federal government thinks at this time that it's a great idea to just transition our best in the world energy, our high-paying oil and gas jobs for quote green energy jobs, whatever that means. I guess it means installing solar panels or something, and that is a huge risk. So I think that Premier Smith is going to get tough. I think we're going to see a lot of united front with her and Premier Scott Moe. Interesting point. Premier Scott Moe is, I think, the second most popular premier in the country right now. And he's getting praise for the Saskatchewan First Act and, putting Saskatchewan in charge of their resources, putting Saskatchewan first over Ottawa. He's getting praised for the same things that Premier Smith has been heavily criticized for. So I think people don't need to be scared of the Sovereignty Act. They don't need to be afraid of these things. It's just about putting Alberta first. Enough is enough. The Trudeau government continues to show us that they don't care about us, that they think our best in the world energy is in fact bad. And I think that that's going to be the first order of business, is moving forward on some of those fronts. I'm really excited to see what's going to come out of this and kind of having that united Western front.
So, Lindsay, if folks want more information about Alberta Proud, how should they best get a hold of you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have one of the biggest social media followings of our kind. We post a lot of really funny stuff on social media. Perhaps I think I'm funnier than more super left-leaning people think I am. But anyways, you can follow us on all our social media channels. You can find us Alberta Proud. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can reach out to me, lindsay.wilson@strongandproud.ca. And you can purchase some Alberta Proud merch online at shop.albertaproud.org.
There you go. Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud, thanks so much for joining us today from Cochrane, Alberta.
Thank you so much.